Well, that sucked. The New York Mets dropped game one of the NLCS 9-0 to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it's one of those games, Jack, where you just have to throw your hands up and say, that's baseball. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you after game one of the NLCS. We're going to recap it all. We're going to preview game two. And I hope that that's where we spend most of our time, because I really don't want to look back on game one much more than we did. But Jack, the Mets find themselves down in the NLCS 1-0, and they have an opportunity tomorrow to try to even things up going back to Citi Field.
It's a little bit of uncharted territory for this Mets team in this postseason run, right? They won the first game of, well, you can go back to the regular season. They won the first game of the doubleheader against the Braves.
Yep.
They won the first game of the wild card series against the Brewers, and they won the first game of the NLDS against the Phillies. Now they're down 0-1. Got to see how they bounce back. Obviously, we talked a little bit in the pre-show. This is a team that all year has been able to bounce back from bad performances. And, like you said, this is baseball. Sometimes you lose a game. Sometimes it's the first game of the most important series of the season. But, we'll talk about it, but I don't think there's a lot to look back on from this game. I think this is going to be a good episode to look forward a lot more into the rest of the series and how that's going to look.
Yeah, I think there's more managerial questions that I have from this game than I do procedural team related things. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that comes up here and is like, oh, the top four guys combined to go over 16 or whatever they were. Like, Jack Flaherty had his A stuff today. Like that just happens. Like, that's not that's playoff baseball. It's a good baseball team they played tonight. Team won 98 games, top seed in the National League. Like, yeah, I'm not surprised they are able to score 9 runs in a baseball game. But before we get into some of the managerial stuff that I know bothered me, I think it bothered Jack as well. I got to tell you about BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the largest catalogs of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA to political props. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline. The game starts here. We'll talk about the starter for the New York Mets tonight, that being Kodai Senga, only getting 4 outs, throwing 10 strikes, 30 total pitches. And he didn't have it. Cutter's command was bad. Fastball velocity was down. Forkball he couldn't control. Francisco Alvarez probably saved 5 runs just with the way that he played defense tonight. Great. The conversation that needs to be had now is they use this opportunity, him starting game one, to try to stretch him out to 60 pitches. They, thought Kodai Senga, really good arm, even for 3 or 4 innings in a limited capacity, still is better than a bullpen game or any of the other scenarios we have. Like, we believe in Kodai Senga's talents. Yeah. But the side quest to all of this was having him start game one instead of game 2 or potentially game 3 is he could be available for game 5. He could be available for a pivotal moment where instead of giving you 60 pitches, he's now able to give you 75 pitches. And where I want to take the show now, Jack, is I don't want to talk about Kodai Senga tonight and the command not being there and the velocity being down. Is he even remotely in the conversation to be starting game 5 now?
I don't think so at this point in time. I mean, we don't have to talk about just tonight, but even going back to the Phillies series, I read a really good breakdown of how his stuff looked after that game.
And the Eno Saris piece. It's the Eno Saris piece.
Correct.
Yes, I referenced this piece in my the postcast that I did. Yes, a huge fan of this, because this was the piece that was like, I'm going to be paying attention to this early for Kodai Senga, and then all the things that Eno talked about were there, and I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah, every single thing he talked about, and you mentioned it already, the cutter control, the fork ball, the feel for the fork ball, the velocity on the fastball, none of it was there. And I think, the mission for this game one start for Senga was, he had 2 solid innings against the Phillies, right? The only mistake was that pitch to Schwarber that he took deep. And you hope based off of that, the Dodgers are probably a better lineup top to bottom, but you hope that's a good pitcher like Kodai Senga, given what we saw from him last year, would be able to go through 3, maybe 4 innings and get up to, like you said, 60 pitches. And I feel like in a way, the managerial decisions for leaving him in after that tough first inning were more of the mind of continuing to try to stretch him out for a game 5. But I just don't see how you can do that at this point in time, just based on the control, based on the lack of velocity, the lack of feel that was just so evident for a lot of his pitches. I would rather, I think at this point, see them try to lean Peterson McGill for game 5. I just don't really know what to do. I just think the answer is definitely not Senga.
Well, the Mets have to win one game to make sure we play a game 5. Let's just put it out there. I expect them to, but game 5 right now is not necessarily, guaranteed. The Dodgers could win the next 3 and we don't get there. But if the Mets win one of these next 3 games, then that conversation will be presented. And what I find so interesting about the decision, and I am not going to play hindsight. I'm not going to play Monday morning quarterback. I did not mind the decision to start Kodai Senga in this game. He made one bad pitch to Kyle Schwarber in the Philly start. It was incredibly reasonable to say Kodai Senga, when he's at his A+, is probably our best starter stuff-wise. And so if we can put him out there, because Jack, it could have very easily gone the other way. He could have made that start against Philly through those 2 innings, diminished velocity, didn't have the command of everything, but then tonight came out there and said, okay, I got 30 more pitches under my belt, and he could have taken that step forward. It was incredibly reasonable to expect that. I'm not mad at that decision. I'm not mad of pushing Manaea to game 2 for tomorrow. I have zero issue with that. I am not going to hindsight that. I didn't mind it at the time. I still don't mind it. I think it was the right decision.
Agreed.
The game theory changed the moment Kodai Senga struggled in the first inning. And you said something very important that I hadn't even considered, but it actually makes me even more mad. Because you said that it felt as if they kept him out there to try to stretch him out to the 60 pitch mark. And by doing so, you're not necessarily doing this, but you're kind of waving the white flag on the game then at that point. You're probably saying like, yeah, we know he's not at his A+ stuff, but we got to get him to 60 pitches and we're going to try to massage this and get our way there. And we're waving the white flag. Well, you then used David Peterson and said, I want to give our offense a shot. So you were trying to keep the game close because you thought your offense could get you back in it, but then you were trying to keep him into the game because you probably wanted to stretch him out to get him to 60 pitches. Like, you can't have it both ways. And that's the thing about this game that bothers me the most is if you ultimately were going to use David Peterson the way that you did tonight, and you did so under the backing of, I want to give our offense a chance because I think if we keep it here at 3-0, we have a chance to win this baseball game. Then why didn't you, after it was 2-0 in the first inning and Kodai Senga clearly didn't have it, go to David Peterson? Because the reason why you don't go to David Peterson to start the second is you don't want to burn him and utilize him in this capacity because you're saving him to be a super lefty reliever when Ohtani and Freeman come up in a big spot.
Right.
And I'm good with that. I love that process. I'm not asking Danny Young to do it, and I don't have another lefty I trust. So that's what David Peterson's role for this team is. And you only want to burn him in this type of scenario. It's a very narrow approach. It's a fine line that you have to walk when making this decision. And then you made the decision, but you did it 5 outs too late. Now, there was no difference tonight between 2-0 and 3-0 with the way that the Mets bats were performing. But in the moment, you don't know that. And so if you're going to burn David Peterson at 3-0 and let him go 2 1/3, I do not understand. When the broadcast clearly showed that he was up there in the pen, he did not start the second inning. That was where I just did not like the process that the Mets used tonight with their utilization of Peterson and the bullpen at large.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. I think also, if the mission was to keep the game close, but also to have a guy, take a bit of a bulk of innings. Obviously, Peterson, like you said, only went 2 1/3, but I feel like, in game 1 of that Phillies series, I think he had 3 innings in that game, and he was the one who took over right from Senga. I was not a fan of going to Reed Garrett as the first option out of the pen against Senga. If, I understand the righty on righty thing with the spot they were at the Dodgers lineup. I understand, you're trying to have the offense in a position to win the game, like Mendy said, and bring out one of your best relievers. But then what happens if he pitches and the Mets end up coming back on offense, and now you've lost, one of your, like we talked about last episode, one of your 3 trusted arms in that bullpen, because you're stretching out Peterson, at some point, and you've already burned Garrett. So you're down to shaky Edwin Diaz if the offense does come back. So just from, the first 5 innings of that game, I was very confused with a lot of the process behind Mendoza's decisions, because a lot of it just, like you just said, just didn't really sync up together.
Right. Again, using David Peterson's not a problem. It's when he used them and the explanation didn't match up with the way it actually went down. Yes. His explanation's fine. If David Peterson comes in the second inning and then that's his explanation to Ken Rosenthal, I'm good. I'm on board. I get it. I totally understand. And then here's the other thing. You use Jose Butto, who we would argue over the last week or so has fallen down the trust triangle, right? If he's at the bottom of the pyramid of the Mets reliever trust triangle, isn't the Reed Garrett spot the perfect spot to use Jose Butto? Multi-inning guy. You know the moment you use him, he's not going to be available. Jose Butto's not available tomorrow. Not happening. He gave you an inning and 2/3. You got 5 outs. He is not available tomorrow. The next time he's going to be available for you is game 3 at a minimum. So if you're going to use him, he should be in the Reed Garrett spot. So if in this world that you've created, I got to keep the game close because I think I'm going to give my offense a chance here and we might be able to come back. I need Reed Garrett for those medium to high leverage situations in the 6th, 7th, and 8th if I'm able to draw back in there. And Carlos has been great. And I do not want this to be a complete, torch fest of Carlos Mendoza. Tonight, I just thought he missed the mark. And the offense being bad is probably going to overshadow a lot of that. I thought tonight he wasn't his best. And again, the offense being as bad as it was and the Dodgers just scoring a ton of runs made it not matter. But I worry about if these games were close, some of these decisions were just not very good.
Yeah, and I also just wonder if you're trying to thread the needle or something there, like, is there any consideration to go with Tyler or McGill in a spot like that? You're hoping to get both length and, some of the righty on righty matchups. You're hoping not to burn Reed Garrett until maybe later. Maybe you don't even have to burn Peterson if your plan is to have Jose Butto pitch anyway and have McGill and Butto go and, maybe let Peterson come in if the game gets close or late. I just like a lot of these things, like it just felt like there were so many other easier, maybe not the right word, but like other decisions that would have made more sense both in the moment and even now in retrospect. Like I still am kind of scratching my head at.
There were better ways to utilize the good process that I think Carlos was trying to use, right? And I think that's the takeaway that we want to have here. I don't think necessarily the overall process was bad, but it could have just been implemented a little bit differently. And those little tweaks, I think, could have helped the Mets out quite a bit. One more nitpick, and this is the tiniest of nitpicks. This game's 6-0. We added Jeff McNeil to this roster. We said Adam Ottavino, stay at home. By the way, would have been a perfect night to have Adam Ottavino out there so he could just throw 55 pitches and then we just never use him again in the series.
Right.
But they put Jeff McNeil on this roster. And I totally get wanting to take it slow. I totally understand. We got to honor the guys that have gotten us here. I'm not going to immediately thrust him into the starting lineup as my second baseman or in the outfield. Like I got a configuration that works. He gives me another lefty bat off the bench late. That's a super nice thing to have. He only had 10 at-bats in the fall league. I get all that. It's 6-0 in the 4th inning. Isn't that the perfect time to give him just the lowest leverage opportunity to get back into the field on a Major League Baseball diamond in front of a big-time crowd and get maybe 2 at-bats instead of the 1 at-bat that he had when he was a pinch hitter for Taylor and didn't even stay in the game on defense? Like, again, these are little things, and the process was not good.
Yeah, I didn't really have any takeaways from the McNeil thing. I mostly just was laughing at the fact that he swung at the first pitch and
Jeff McNeil.
It's just absolutely classic. I think the process is hard to come up with when you're dealing with a weird situation with a guy coming back from injury who had like a limited time in the Arizona Fall League. That was like a MLB approved situation. Like it's kind of whatever. I see what you're saying, but I really didn't think twice about it. I was more confused at the lack of defensive time that he had in the game, I guess. But as far as the at-bats, like McNeil's McNeil, he's gonna go up there and it seemed like he hit the ball hard when he did, but we'll probably see him more down the line going forward, especially with this bullpen game and probably plenty of righties that the Mets will face. It
just felt like 6-0. This is where you get Jose Iglesias out of the game and off of his feet because he's just been playing all the time. Like it just again, defense is I know it's a defensive downgrade. It's 6-0. It doesn't matter. Like get Jeff in there because here's the thing. He's gonna be asked to play the field at some point in some capacity this series, would be my guess. And so wouldn't you rather the rust come off in a game 1 where you're down 6-0 and it's low leverage?
I think if anything, I would have rather had him pinch hit and replace Starling Marte in the field because he gives you another lefty bat. Obviously, it kind of like makes a run harder from Alonso to Winker with another lefty bat in there. You kind of have to tweak your bullpen if you're the Dodgers. You also get Jeff to play right field.
It's 6-0 though. It's 6-0. Like you have to completely just the whiteboard. You just have to clean it off.
Right.
We need to get him in the game here.
No, I agree. My point was I got too far into it. I would have liked to see him in right field specifically because you don't want to move Iglesias off this lineup and you don't want to move Mark Vientos off this lineup there needs to be a spot for Jeff McNeil. You don't want to move Nimmo, and so you put him in right field for Marte. I think, just having him pinch hit for Tyrone Taylor was kind of weird.
Right. I think the fact that the only thing Jeff McNeil got out of a game where the Mets were down 6-0 at one point and lost the game 9-0 is one pinch hit at bat where he saw one pitch. Now the one pitch is on Jeff, but the only one at bat and not seeing the field, that's an organizational. That was a Carlos Mendoza thing that I just didn't necessarily get.
Right. I'm with you on that.
The way you feel about Nick Castellanos is the way I feel about watching Freddie Freeman hit. It just this dude. It doesn't matter what team he's on. It doesn't matter how old he is. It doesn't matter if he's got 2 bum ankles. He's always going to come up with a big hit into the gap against the New York Mets, and it's just going to drive me insane. Because he did it again. And he has a bum ankle. Dude can't run. It doesn't matter. Double.
I just feel like I can't even stress about Freddie Freeman because he's an MVP. Like, Nick Castellanos drives me nuts because he's not a guy that has been killing the Mets for forever. It's like a recent thing. But Freddie Freeman, it's like a known quantity at this point. It's like, when Daniel Murphy was on the Nationals, it was like, he's coming up, he's just going to get a hit. Or like Chipper Jones before him on the Braves. He's coming up, he's going to get a big hit in a big moment. And so when Freeman came up, even with both bum ankles, like, it is what it is. I just hope that they limit it going forward and maybe take like a Bryce Harper-like strategy to him for the rest of the series.
Let's pivot and let's preview game 2 here. We'll keep these episodes probably on the shorter side if we're going to recap every single game, or at least, get you guys our instant thoughts after these games are done and preview the next game ahead. Sean and I on the mound for the New York Mets. Dave Roberts has said that it is going to be a bullpen game in game 2, and that makes sense. They win the first game. It kind of opens them up to be able to do this because they know they're going to have to do it at least once. I think it's probably going to be it's probably going to have to happen again for them at some point. And so to do it here because you have the 1-0 lead, and I think the most important thing is you didn't use your bullpen tonight, and so you can do it and probably get away with it. And that's probably the more disappointing thing. Mets lost the game. That's disappointing thing number 1. 1B is you didn't get to the bullpen, which is the place where you have an advantage here. Like the thing that is going to, if the Dodgers are going to lose the series and if the Mets are going to win and move on to the World Series, it is because the Dodgers rotation stinks. Like their rotation is not very good. It is weak. It has underperformers. It's injured. They went to a bullpen game in a 5-game series against the Padres. Like this is where you have an advantage over a team that spent $1 billion this past offseason. Like that's where the advantage lies, and you didn't lean on that. That was the other thing. You lose 9-0, fine. I get that they were not winning this game. But to allow Jack Flaherty to go 7, he just cruised. And to the first start, I think, since Scherzer in 2021 for the Dodgers in the postseason, where a starter pitched more than 6 innings. Like the Mets could have put Dave Roberts in a really uncomfortable spot, even though they were winning the baseball game, and they just didn't do that. And so that leads us into this preview for game 2. Mets had the race on the mound in Sean Manaea, and we saw the last time he was taking the bump as the ace in a big spot. He delivered against the Phillies. There's no reason. This sets up very similarly to him for the Phillies. The top of the lineup has 2 lefties, Schwarber and Harper, and this time it's Ohtani and Freeman. This sets up well for Manaea to have the advantage and to be able to use that sweeper and try to get those guys off balance. And look, the New York Mets have to leave LA splitting this series. If they lose tomorrow, it's not the end of the world being down 2-0 because a series doesn't start until a road team wins a game, but you'd feel a lot better about things. I think 9-0 would just immediately leave everybody's mind, Jack. If they win tomorrow and the series is 1-1 going back to Citi Field, everyone would be like 9-0. That was weeks ago. Who cares? If they 1-1 going back to Citi Field, all the momentum.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, 9-0 is better than losing a heartbreaker 3-2. It's like, didn't have our best stuff on the mound tonight. Didn't have our best stuff against a guy who did have his best stuff in Jack Flaherty. You can flush it a lot easier, especially with the bullpen coming up. And I'm with you. Like I'm mad about not being able to get into the bullpen more in tonight's game. But look, they're going to have a challenge still against this bullpen, regardless, even if they got to it, just based on how they performed in that game 4 against the Padres. I'm looking forward to game 2. And I'm a little bit more concerned about this bullpen than I was with Philadelphia, just because of how battle tested they already have been.
Yeah, this is not. Look, the Mets, if you're going to have a stinker in this series, the perfect time to have it. Thing number 2, this offense is going to recover. They've picked themselves up. There's too much talent. It's not like the Dodgers got away with one and they started somebody that wasn't their top end starter. They're going to a bullpen game in game 2. Walker Buehler has not been good this year. He's going to be their game 3 starter. They're going to get Yamamoto once in this series in game 4. Jack Flaherty starting tonight is the best the Dodgers have to offer in terms of starting pitching. And tonight, he was even better than his best. Like, that was peak Jack Flaherty tonight. You're not going to see any better than what you saw from him tonight. And so I have zero worry about the offense being able to break through against this team. And if the Dodgers are going to a bullpen game, it's not like their bullpen is like otherworldly. They don't have the Cleveland Guardians bullpen. Like they don't. They don't have the San Diego Padres bullpen. They don't have an elite bullpen.
It just looks so good in that game 4, though. Like it, and I know the Padres bats went cold, and that is like a big part of the narrative. But like that just is what worries me is, they went into the bullpen game. Everyone was like, haha, look at the Dodgers having to throw a bullpen game in an elimination game. And then they came out scoreless.
Yes, fair enough. But I will tell you, all right, I'm going to say something out loud. You tell me if you agree or disagree.
Okay.
The Mets winning tomorrow 9-0 would be more impactful than the Dodgers winning game 1 9-0.
I am with you.
Because if the Mets win tomorrow in a similar vein, not necessarily the same score, I just use that as the example, but if they win in a similar vein to the way the Dodgers won tonight, that is a net positive for the Mets. They stole a game on the road, and they're going back to Citi Field 1-1. They then got the 9-run or the big outburst against the Dodgers bullpen game, forcing them to just burn through everybody. And now you're set up in game 3 where your bullpen's great. It's nice and fresh. The Dodgers are turning to Walker Buehler, who has not been good this year, and their bullpen is tired. Like, you would feel a lot if the Mets tomorrow do what the Dodgers did to them tonight, going into game 3, the Mets will feel a lot better about the remainder of this series than the Dodgers. They will be the favorite. I think if they do tomorrow what the Dodgers did to them tonight, the Mets will be the favorite in the series the rest of the way.
I don't even need 9 runs from them tomorrow. Like 5, 6.
Sure.
Like as long as I'm seeing something from the offense, and I'm very confident that I will, again, just based on what I've seen from this team all year, then I'm feeling really good going home with the way this team has played at home, with good starters lined up for the home games, with the offense that's come alive. Yeah, I'm feeling real good if the Mets are able to put up some runs against this Dodgers bullpen tomorrow in game 2.
Force Dave Roberts to constantly be pointing to the outfield. Make that bullpen door. They're going to need WD-40 for that bullpen door out there because they're going to be using it so much. Like, that's what you have to do tomorrow. Like, that's what you have to do, because if a bullpen game is not necessarily a bad thing, right? The Tigers did it. The Tigers bullpen their way to almost being in the ALCS, right?
Right.
But it's when these bullpen games happen, if you're the opposing team and you can make it hurt, like they got to burn guys, guys just got to wear it, or they're just rotating through like 7-8 relief. If you make Dave Roberts pull his hair out and he's agonizing over what he's going to do, that's a win. Like, that's what you have to do. And so if the Mets are able to do that and they get the series going back home 1-1, I'd feel great about where they're at. I still feel good about where they're at as a team. Like, that's the worst starting pitching performance they're going to get this series, I say with 65% confidence.
Probably 1 1/3 is and 20 balls to 10 strikes is pretty bad.
Right. Like, are they going to? I don't think Sean Manaea is going to have a start that bad. Jose Quintana is a Cy Young candidate right now with what he's been doing for the last month and a half.
At least you're getting more depth in an inning and a third.
Right. So that's the worst starting pitching performance I think the Mets are going to get in this series. Okay. And on the flip side, that's the best starting pitching that the Dodgers are going to get this series.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just chalk that one up to those two things happened. They're not going to happen again. We'll see how these teams play the rest of the way. That
was exactly my thought coming out of that game, was just, hey, Flaherty had it, Senga didn't, whatever. Time for game 2.
Yep, and that's where we're going to leave this episode of the Bleav in Mets podcast. And shout out to all of you. The last episode of this show, and Jack does not know this, the last episode of this show, the highest or the most viewed episode since Jack and I have taken over the podcast feed. That is thanks to all of you. We're going to have some more social media coming soon. We will both tweet about that. There's a TikTok account with some clips coming out here from the show, so you can consume the short form content. We'll do some off-season stuff as well there, really beef that up. But we appreciate you joining us here for this therapy session after game 1. But more importantly, I think this episode was a really good look at game 2 and the remainder of this series, and why things aren't as bad as the 9-0 scoreline indicates tonight. But we got a game 2 tomorrow. Sean Manaea on the mound. Our ace, Sean Manaea, on the mound in game 2 for the New York Mets. And if they win tomorrow, it's a 1-1 series going back to Citi Field. And that's the way you would draw it up if you could, you would drop 2-0, obviously, but you'd steal one on the road, go back 1-1. You'd feel great about where you're at. So the Mets still have that opportunity in front of them, and we'll be back to break it all down when game 2 is over. So that's going to do it for us here on this edition of Bleav in Mets. Appreciate you all listening. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.